In the mid-1970s, a group of American scientists made a statement that, in theory, should have changed the future of food. Not theoretically, not someday, but concretely. They described a plant that produces unusually dense protein, improves the soil instead of depleting it, and can feed people almost entirely. Not just one part, but nearly the whole plant. Leaves, pods, seeds, flowers, roots. Everything is useful. In the scientific report, it sounded calm and restrained. But if translated into plain human language, the meaning was almost provocative. We have found a crop that works too well. Then something happened that is rarely explained directly. There was no loud failure, no scandal, no disease that would have doomed the project. Simply after a few years, the plant disappeared from discussions, programs, and priorities. It was no longer developed, mentioned, or considered important. Today, most Americans haven't even heard of it. Yet, if you stop and think, the question should really be, how could anyone overlook such a plant? Imagine it not as a line in a report or an exotic novelty from afar, but as part of a real system. It doesn't lie on the ground taking up acres. It grows upward, climbs, and uses space that usually goes unused. It doesn't give a single seasonal harvest and vanish. It feeds gradually, week after week. It doesn't specialize in just one thing. It seems to take on multiple roles at once, roles we normally distribute among different crops, different purchases, and different store sections. And at some point, you get the sense that this isn't an accident, it's intentional, as if nature decided to test how efficiently food can function. We are used to thinking of agriculture as a set of compromises. Here, protein; there, greens; here, a root; there, a legume. Each field serves one purpose. Now imagine a plant where this logic breaks down. Its young leaves are edible, soft, rich, not just decorative. It has pods that are eaten while tender and require no acquired taste. It has seeds that, once cooked, give the dense feeling of satiety familiar to anyone who has eaten legumes. And finally, it has an underground part, not a byproduct, but a full-fledged product that, in a conventional system, would be grown separately. At this point, almost everyone starts expecting a catch. That's normal. We live in a world where convenience almost always comes with a hidden price. But here, something different is happening. The price exists, but not where we're used to looking for it. Almost everything we grow today behaves the same way. It drains nutrients from the soil season after season and leaves the land exhausted. This is considered normal. We don't ask questions because an entire industry is built around support: fertilizers, supplements, enhancers. Now just pause for a moment. What if a plant behaves differently? What if it doesn't take the last bit from the soil, but instead leaves the earth in better condition than before? Not in a lab, but in an ordinary garden. Not as a promise, but as a result. At this moment, the story ceases to be merely botanical and becomes human. Because it's not about a miracle or a trend. It's about cooperation, about a plant that can not only take, but also give back, about soil that becomes more alive, not poorer, afterward. And if you've ever tried to grow something yourself, you understand how much this changes your relationship to the entire process. Then comes the question that's hard to ignore. If a plant is nutritious, resilient, understandable, time-tested, and doesn't require constant intervention, why hasn't it become part of everyday food? Why is it rarely mentioned when the future of nutrition is discussed? Why isn't it in the places where, logically, it should have been among the first options? The answer is definitely not that nobody knew about it. People don't preserve seeds for generations out of curiosity. They do it when a plant is reliable, when it doesn't fail, when it feeds in difficult years, and doesn't demand special conditions. Such knowledge is rarely recorded in reports. It's passed hand to hand, not because it's pretty, but because it works. And here it's important to pause, because the story of this plant isn't about exoticism or faraway lands. It's closer than you think. It's about which solutions are convenient in a large system and which are too independent. About how some crops fit perfectly into the model of constant replacement and shopping, while others exist by their own rules, quietly and reliably. Only now does it make sense to name it. It is the winged bean, a calm name for a plant that never sought attention. It simply did its work. And perhaps that's exactly why its story unfolded so strangely. When you think about modern agriculture, you probably imagine vast fields, machines, fertilizers, and packaged seeds. Everything seems logical. We buy, we grow, we harvest. Now imagine a plant that simply refuses to follow these rules. It doesn't need fertilizers. It produces its own nitrogen directly from the air. It provides its seeds year after year without requiring annual replacement. It is naturally protected from pests and doesn't need chemical treatments. For an ordinary farmer, this sounds like a dream. For a system built on constant dependency, it is nearly revolutionary, because most of modern agriculture is a model of repeated purchases: seeds, fertilizers, chemicals, again seeds, again fertilizers, again chemicals. Money flows where dependency is created. And the winged bean? It breaks this entire chain without even trying. In the mid-1970s, when American researchers described it, they noted every part of the plant is edible, and it can become a staple food in the tropics. The plant required no complicated care. It was resilient. It was efficient. And for several years, pilot programs began worldwide. In the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, and several African countries. Everything was going well. But then something stopped these initiatives. At first, this seemed strange. But on closer inspection, the logic is clear. The plant does not create customers. It doesn't sell seeds every year. It doesn't require fertilizers. It doesn't need chemicals. It simply grows. From a profit perspective, it is irrelevant. It works for people, not corporations. And that was its strength. And at the same time, the reason it disappeared from most programs. For an ordinary American, this may sound incredible. But think about how it works in practice. Most crops grown today are hybrids that produce weak seeds if you try to save them yourself. Every year, a farmer is forced to buy new seeds. Chemical protection and fertilizers become mandatory. All processes are externally controlled. The winged bean doesn't. It gives freedom to the farmer. It creates independence. And that is what makes it inconvenient for the system. And here comes the moment of real wonder. All these years, Americans pay for seeds, fertilizers, supplements, and pest protection, trying to get the most out of the land. The winged bean does almost everything by itself. It improves the soil, fights pests, produces an edible harvest in its entirety, and even reproduces its seeds naturally. It seems to say, why pay more when you can simply work with me? You begin to understand why it is not promoted, not because the plant is bad or difficult. On the contrary, it's because it is too good. It breaks the familiar models that farmers and industry are used to. A strong, resilient, nutritious plant that grows on its own. It sounds like a perfect utopia. But in the real world, perfect utopia often ends up on the sidelines because it doesn't fit into a system where constant dependency and cash flow are what matter. And here, it's worth pausing and reflecting. Think about how often we hear about trendy superfoods, new hybrids, patented seeds. All of this is an attempt to turn plants into tools of the system. The winged bean, it isn't sold. It isn't patented. It doesn't require investment to survive. It gives freedom to those who grow it. And it is this freedom that makes it so unique. You might think that plants like this have gone extinct or survived only in the wild, but no. The winged bean has existed alongside humans for thousands of years, sustaining families, feeding communities, and being cultivated in homes and farms. It survived the years when industrial agriculture pushed out local crops. It was a quiet, unnoticed hero of nutrition. And now, when you look at it, you realize the story isn't about botany. It's about choices that benefit people and choices that benefit the system. And this is where the true value of the winged bean becomes clear. Not as a scientific discovery, not as an exotic plant, but as a cultural and economic phenomenon. It shows that sometimes the best solutions aren't those that generate external profit, but those that work for people, for families, for food on the table. And that surprises, amazes, and makes you ask, how many such plants have we already lost? Understanding why the system sidelined the winged bean is not just the story of one plant. It is the story of how modern agriculture is built, how it decides which crops to promote and which to leave by the wayside. And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. The winged bean didn't simply fail to fit in. It didn't fit in because it was too independent, too useful, and too real. And this is what makes it especially valuable today. Because if you ever want to change something, to return to what actually works, the winged bean is already waiting for you. It doesn't require rule changes. It simply grows. Now imagine this plant right there in your garden. The winged bean is not just a subject of research or a story from 1970s reports. It is real, tangible, and its power is felt here and now. You plant a single plant, and it turns your garden into a mini kitchen. Leaves for salads, flowers for garnishing dishes, young pods for frying or boiling, seeds for roasting or grinding into flour, and underground tubers as a nutritious bonus. All of this comes from one plant that grows almost on its own. The southern states of America are perfect for it. Florida, South Texas, Southern California, Hawaii, sun, warmth, long growing season, and the winged bean literally climbs upward along its support, as if testing how much space it can occupy. Even if you live further north, you can start seeds indoors or use a greenhouse. It adapts, enjoys attention, but doesn't require you to constantly tend it. This plant works with you, not against you. And here's what truly amazes. The winged bean is completely independent. Seeds can be collected and planted year after year. The soil becomes more fertile, and you don't need annual purchases of fertilizers or chemicals. It gives a rare sense of control and freedom in modern gardening. It asks for nothing but care, and yet it gives everything. Protein in the seeds reaches almost 40%, higher than most legumes. Leaves and flowers are edible raw or cooked. Pods can be fried, boiled, or baked, and the tubers provide a tasty, nutritious bonus. Every day the harvest offers something new, and you watch in awe at how everything grows in harmony. For gardeners and families, it's more than a plant. It's a small teacher and ally. Children love watching the pods grow before their eyes. Adults enjoy that the soil isn't depleted, but improves with each season. And you decide what to plant, what to eat, and what to harvest. In a world where almost everything grown depends on annual purchases and patents, this feeling of freedom is rare. The winged bean is an act of independence. Every sprout is a small revolution. You stop being dependent on a system that dictates seeds and fertilizers. You take control, and your garden becomes your mini kingdom of food. It inspires experiments, sharing harvests with neighbors, and creating dishes that surprise with taste and nutrition. Most importantly, this plant restores your understanding of real food. It shows that food can be simple, reliable, diverse, and delicious without extra chemicals or complicated conditions. With each sprout you plant, you see the results firsthand: a harvest, healthy soil, and the joy of doing something beneficial for yourself and your family. And when you taste it, feeling the protein, texture, and variety, you realize you've never looked at vegetables and legumes the same way. The winged bean is not just a plant. It is a tool of freedom, nourishment, and inspiration that has been with humans for thousands of years, waiting for you to rediscover it. Every American who plants a winged bean participates in reviving a crop that works for people, not for the system. One sprout becomes a mini garden. One harvest becomes a full kitchen. One season becomes a constant source of food and joy. And when you gather the leaves, flowers, pods, seeds, and tubers, you understand, this is not just gardening. This is a small revolution in your garden. The winged bean gives you the freedom to choose, to create, to nourish yourself, and to be amazed. It shows that even a single plant can change your perspective on food, on the land, and on your own capabilities. And when you plant it this season, you're not just growing food. You're creating a life that works for you, not against you.